Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software GRAITEC Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is John Summers. He's the Vice President, Construction and Utility Sector of the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. John is responsible for the strategic direction of construction and utility programs for services for AEM membership. He strives to help equipment manufacturers improve their businesses. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, welcome. Thanks, Todd. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how'd you get into this industry to begin with?
So, I went and listened to a couple of your previous episodes, and I always think everybody's entrance to the industry is fascinating. And a lot of times I talk to, folks that are working at our members or contractors, and, you know, I don't know if I want to say they were born into it, but, they had some kind of tie to construction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one of their, parents did home remodels or something like that. That is not my story whatsoever, right? So I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. So we were, around some farms, but we lived, in the city, about 9,000 people or something like that. So didn't have a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of exposure to what kind of AEM covers, and I'll get into that in a second. But whether that's agriculture or construction, came down to Milwaukee area for college. Actually have a computer science degree. Started with one company, first job, and jumped ship from that about a year and a half, 2 years later, and came to AEM in 2007. So it actually is my 16-year anniversary at AEM in a couple days, I
Wow.
think. So yeah, but I started in our marketing area. So I was managing our websites. So we own some trade shows along with the AEM website. So uh, managed the websites, did a little online marketing, back in the day, and kind of thought like, hey, this industry is super interesting. And I attended my first ConExpo, ConAg, that AEM owns and produces in 2008, and started meeting a few people. And I was like, this is really interesting. And there's some really cool stuff going on in the construction industry and with the equipment that's happening. So I thought, hey, this is kind of neat. Maybe I want to, stay in this and kind of figure it out. Fast forward to 2013, late 13, early 14, and AEM opened a couple new roles, one on our agriculture side and one on our construction side. And I applied for the construction side and somehow got it with no experience in the industry really whatsoever. But figured I could, learn quickly and kind of jump in. And with as quickly as technology is changing in this industry, we're all learning at the same time anyways. So
Yeah.
just kind of, did my own research and looked at everybody's website and figured out what all the equipment was. And here I am. So yeah, 16 years later, man, it's been kind of a wild ride. And, it's kind of a crazy thing to, I guess, sort of do a complete career pivot when you're like, I don't know how old I was, 30 at the time. So yeah, I mean, it's luckily I got to stay with the same company and same industry, and I'm still here. But it was kind of wild going from marketing to whatever I do now.
Nice. That's awesome. So we have a very similar background in stories. My marketing's near and dear to my heart as well too. I like to say I was a happy accident coming into construction. My whole
Yeah,
background's in marketing, and then I stumbled into this. It was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool.
it's pretty
That's
crazy,
awesome.
and if anybody knows anything about associations, right? So AM, we're a trade association for equipment manufacturers, but there's an association for everything. Right? I mean, we're the big ones for the equipment, but then there's little subsegments of that for each type of contractor. One's focused on damage prevention of underground utilities. Like there's all sorts of stuff. So once you get into the association world, it kind of just opens the doors to like so much different stuff, and like the
Mhm.
breadth of what we cover is pretty wild. So yeah, happy accidents are good. I mean, I'm glad glad to still be in this industry. I've met a lot of good people, a lot of cool stuff going on, and we're in pretty revolutionary times with technology. It's really fun.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you think that we get more people kind of like us, the happy accidents, into construction and make it not necessarily a happy accident, but a conscious choice of, yeah, let's go into
Yeah,
construction.
yeah, that's the challenge, right? I mean, everybody talks about workforce, and I think our industry, meaning probably heavy construction or even vertical in building trades and stuff like that. I mean, it's really tough to get people to understand that they're good paying jobs. There's the old thought of whether you're working in a manufacturing facility or on a job site, like the dirty, dark, dangerous, there's probably some more
Mhm.
D's in there somewhere, right? So it's that. And you think about, how these manufacturing facilities work today or look today, whether you're, a welder, assembler, painter, running a CNC machine, whatever it is, all the way out to the job site. I mean, it's been many years, if ever, in my life that I've literally driven past the job site and seen somebody with a shovel in a ditch, right? I mean, you're running pretty sophisticated machines, in the air conditioned cab. It's been about mid 90s here for the last week, so that'd be nice right now in Wisconsin. Uh, Even warmer down south. I mean, it's a pretty interesting, um, role that you play, and you're building, or if you're in the agriculture side, growing the food that our nation needs. So
Yeah.
it's the improving the quality of life, whether that's building a road, installing fiber so people have internet in their home, whatever it is. It's pretty crazy. So how we can get that message out, so more people are drawn to this instead of on accident is always a challenge. I think that if we keep showing the technology that's used and talk about how they're good paying, secure jobs, providing value to your local community, I think that's got to be the message.
Yeah, I totally agree. What do you think are some of the latest advancements in construction technology that have really started to come in and revolutionize the industry over the last few years?
Yeah, so if you take a step back, so if we talk about Association of Equipment Manufacturers for a second, right? So we cover equipment manufacturers, whether that's a whole good, drivable piece of equipment, portable, what we call like some of the handheld tools, um, all the components that go into them, and then the customers, or I'm sorry, companies that provide a service to the industry. And we cover five industry sectors. So on one side is the agriculture and forestry piece of it. And then I'm responsible for the construction, mining, and utility side of the association.
Mhm.
Obviously, when you get into technology, where that's like engine technology or GPS guidance or equipment data and anything like that, like there's a big crossover, right? So that some of that technology is going to a tractor, same as a bulldozer, right? I mean, just doing a different end function. So, if you think about, if we focus just on the construction side of it, there's, back to that workforce piece of it, we have a lot of inexperienced people coming in the industry. Thankfully, they're coming in, right? But they have no experience running a machine. So, however you can, provide them additional guidance on how to operate the machine, meaning like take a little bit of the control out of their hands, that, just reaps benefits. So, think about, if you have a vehicle with lane keeping or lane centering technology, right? If you have a inexperienced driver, you might start to drift a little bit and it'll pull you back in. It's sort of kind of the same thing. So if you're, run a machine and grading, like you might not know exactly, what grade to put that at. So the guidance will kind of take that control out of your hands. So I think that, the the technology's kind of been around for a while, but it's really getting more precise and easier to implement now.
Mhm.
So that is one of the biggest advantages I think that I see, that's something that's like in the marketplace, ready to be used right now, and it's really making. There's a saying of make a decent operator, or make a good operator great and make an inexperienced operator good, right? So
Yeah.
any way you can level up those people, I think that's the thing that everybody needs to be taking advantage of.
Yeah. Let's double click into that, but go through it from the safety vantage point of it. Uh, how is equipment really helping to contribute to a safer work environment out on the job site?
So I referenced the lane keeping in your automobile. So a lot of stuff we see hits on road first, right? So I think it's, the controlled environment sort of, right? I mean, you're in a lane, you know kind of what's going on. So if we watch what's happening there, and a lot of those things that are making driving safer, a lot of that is hitting or is coming to off-road equipment. So, whether it's brake assist, proximity detection, or object detection, wherever you are. If you looked at, some of the technology that was released at ConExpo ConAg this past March, there was numerous pieces of whether it's camera system, um, radar, lidar sensors, applying a brake so you don't hit, whether that's a person behind you, another piece of equipment, some structure, maybe it's material that somebody laid in the site that you don't see there. I think that safety piece of it, again, when you're taking that control out of the operator's hands, not fully, but kind of just assisting them with something that they might not see. I think that's really where that safety piece is really going to hit, in the next couple of years. There's also, just the piece of it of just awareness of everything that's going on. You think about your cab and how they used to be in your visibility, and I mentioned the camera systems. Uh, that is a lot more focus has been put on operator. I think we kind of usually call it operator comfort, but it's more than that, right? It's your line of sight, it's your visibility of everything. Whether that's just, there's not a pillar here anymore because the cab's been redesigned, or if it is through like a camera system like that.
Yeah, interesting. I'm curious with AI kind of coming into the equation and helping to take over. How have people been relating to the equipment or responding to it? Are they, excited about the technological advancements, or is there some kind of unease of, hey, well, this if we go here and kind of automate this function, where does that leave me? What's
Right.
the
Of
response
course,
been?
there's that. Right. I mean, of course, people are thinking, oh, the robots are coming for my jobs and
Yeah.
everything. And everybody always kind of talks about it. Go back to our first conversation. No, there's not enough people, right? And if there is people, they're inexperienced people. So, my view, if you get into AI and you take this all the way to their level, I think we're probably talking about a fully autonomous job site, right? There's
Mhm.
debate. You can debate all day long whether we'll ever see that in our lifetime or not. But there's what are those steps, like those moments of autonomy or moments of automation on the way there, right?
Mhm.
So if that is, hey, I do have somebody that's, running this excavator and they're digging a hole and they're dumping in this haul truck. Well, maybe there doesn't need to be a driver in that haul truck because it's doing a repeated path, right? It's getting waiting, getting filled up, driving over here, dumping, driving back.
Mhm.
So it's like, what pieces can we automate of a job site that'll still allow the human interaction and people to be in machines, and then those other people that may be reluctant to come into this industry because they, are a little bit more, whether it's advanced in their career or they're coming from a technology company. It's like, what jobs does that then open up, right? So there still has to be maintenance done to everything. There still has to be somebody essentially programming the path of that haul truck. So I mean, it's just different jobs. But yeah, I mean, it's you throw AI into that, and you think about the mundane tasks that people don't want to do anyway, or the things that would be really hard to do precise. So one of the stories that I remember hearing a couple of years ago was there was a contractor putting piles in a solar farm that the panels would then mount on, right? And those
Mhm.
needed to be spaced however many feet apart it is. And essentially, that was somebody getting in a skid steer, driving it forward to the exact spot, getting out, taking a panel off, putting it on a thing. And why wouldn't that be automated? Why wouldn't that thing just move forward, let somebody take a panel off of it, move the exact X number of feet forward again? It's like it's less wear and tear on your body. You're not climbing on a cab the whole time. That then gets into safety. I mean, the egress and getting in and out of everything. I mean, you can fall getting out of your car, right? I mean, it's just any of that, less movement, and having it be more precise is just better for everybody. So I think we'll see a lot of automated features, as we kind of call them,
Mhm.
start hitting the job site more and more over the next few years.
Yeah. What do you think? Let's go out kind of 10 years time. Look in your crystal ball. What does the job site look like? How automated do you think everything's going to be?
It's tough, man, because it's you look at where autonomy is really hitting the off-road equipment market now, and it's mining and in some instances agriculture.
Mhm.
And a lot of times that's because those are controlled environments, right? So you're at a mine, you're not near any people. There's no random pedestrian on a bicycle that's going to drive in front of the truck that it has to react to, right? So, at a farm, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you may just be right off a road, but you're in a multi-thousand-acre field, and it's a pretty controlled environment. There aren't just people wandering around. So we'll continue to see that advance. Like I said, there's a lot of that going on, even in construction. Some sites, I mean, if you're operating, I live in Milwaukee area, hence the Brewers logo here behind me. Um, but if you're working on something downtown, I mean, that's just a tough thing to automate because it's probably not a repeatable task. It's not really a necessarily controlled environment. You may be able to automate some of that. But if we go, like you said, 10 years out, whatever it is, I think we'll be having a lot of, say, a new subdivision or something like that. There's a chance that that whole road could be put in with pretty much a couple people monitoring what's going on.
Hmm.
I think there's also the thought of, on highway, they call it platooning, right? So there's a driver in the first vehicle and the second car just follows it and follows it like that.
Hmm.
There's some thought of that happening as well, right? So if you're um, you know, digging a trench and laying whether it's underground conduit for fiber or electric like that, there could be somebody operating a trencher, and then however that's being laid could just basically follow that and keep the safe distance and lay that conduit. So I
Hmm.
think there's pieces of it that we'll see automated. I mean, me personally, especially with how different construction job sites are, I think we'd have a tough time seeing anything be fully automated.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Where do you think that the prefab portion of it comes in? Because then in that environment, you could automate a whole lot more, because it is in that controlled environment. So it puts you more in the ag and mining kind of environment. But where do you see prefab fitting in?
So I think, if we're talking prefab, a building, or I know there's been some work done in, I think it was a hotel in New York or something like that, right?
Mhm.
I think that the less amount of material you can bring to a job site and assemble on site, the better. For most instances, there was
Mhm.
actually I was listening to another podcast a while ago, and I can't remember who it was now. Should be because I give them credit for this, but they said, when you buy a car, if you're getting it delivered to you, like it shows up all in one piece. Like the assembly's done somewhere else. They don't come lay all the parts all over your front yard and then put it together in your driveway, right? I mean, it just seems kind of backwards when you think about, building, whether it's a commercial building and all the parts are all just laid around. Because then there's also the time spent, or you could even say wasted, finding, the next pile of studs, or
Oh, for sure.
where's the truss for this, right?
They
So
just
it's like
get
the
lost on
more
the
we
job
can.
site.
Exactly, yeah. Or you're just grabbing the telehandler and moving them around 7 times before you actually need
Right.
them because they're in your way all the time, right? So I think that, if we can, essentially turn parts of the construction process into more of a style of a factory, and do things off site, you may be able to automate more stuff on site, right? So I think there'd be some different equipment used, but I just mentioned, using a telehandler just to move your material around to get out of your way. Well, now if it comes and it's finished, you may be able to say like, hey, telehandler, program it, go grab that, truss and bring it over here and let these guys put it up and then grab the next one.
Mhm.
So I think automation becomes easier when the product is finished as well. A lot of the stuff we talk about isn't necessarily um, vertical construction or building, right? It's more heavy highway, utility infrastructure, whether that's underground or overhead. So you got to think about what pieces of that are repeatable and you could automate. So if I mentioned a trencher and following it with conduit behind it. I mean, same could be said for you putting utility poles in the ground. I mean, they're spaced out however many feet that is. And if you have a truck there that goes up and needs to dig a hole to put the pole in that, like it's like, sure, let's figure out how to do that and take that job, and automate that job so it's more precise and easier to plan around.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a ton of sense. Is there a way that people should be thinking about these advancements and the efficiency that it brings and the productivity that it brings to a construction job site? Is there a way that they should be thinking about that maybe there is not necessarily on their radar right now?
So I think, yes, to answer that question, easy yes. So I think when people think about a new technology or even a new product as a consumer, right? You're thinking, hey, I want this because it's going to do this for me.
Hmm.
You don't really ever take that to the next step and think about all the other stuff that it's going to have an impact, like trickle down the line, right? So you think about, we released that benefits of construction equipment technology, and their impact on society study a couple months ago or something like that. Yeah, early May. And we tried to highlight that there isn't just one advantage for each of these technologies that's available. So like if you take telematics, so machine data that you can monitor remotely, right? A lot of contractors are using that for one thing. The thing might be different. It might be, hey, I just want to know how many hours are on my machine so I know when to do maintenance. I know when I'm at 480 hours, I should probably get some new filters ready because I got to do a 500-hour maintenance, right? Or they're looking at their idle time and saying, hey, we're burning through fuel. We don't need to keep these machines on when they're not actually being productive, right? And they're focusing on one of those things, which is awesome because if you kind of grab all the data and grab everything at once, it's just fire hose and you get overwhelmed, you give up, right? So it's like pick that one thing, but don't stop at that one thing. It's like, all right, cool. Now we know hours on our equipment and we can plan our maintenance schedule. Now what's next? Now we might be able to say like, hey, we're monitoring, the speed that these wheel loaders are driven, and maybe it's too fast, maybe it's too slow, maybe they're cornering too hard. We can train our operators to be better. Then what's next after that, right? So I think there's all of these different things that you got to look at.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of started this conversation by talking about machine control and automating, grading and stuff like that, right? And talking about making a inexperienced operator much better. But then you think about, well, what else does that impact? Well, if I do it right the first time based on a 3D digital model, I don't have to go back and redo it. So now I'm saving on material, I'm saving on time. I'm not paying somebody overtime to fix it because now they're going to come pave soon, right? It's all of these other, I don't even want to call them like secondary benefits because they're all primary, right? It's just kind of
Yeah.
like, what thing are you really worried about? So I think that goes for a lot of this technology. And I think once people understand that you know, if somebody's selling it to you, they're going to figure out what your pain point is and say, this will solve that, right? And that's good. But like if you think about all the other things that it could also impact and provide value to you, I think that's when you really just reap the rewards of it.
Yeah. I totally agree. When you bring in the data portion of it, I think that's a real hurdle in construction right now is that there's so much data coming from so many different
Yeah.
places, from the equipment, from the software, from, every single technology can report and track so much data, but taking the time to think through, what do I really want to get out of this data and how do I want to use it and gain insights from it? That's not done very often. And the consequence of that is you're not really going to look at the data, or you're just looking at that one feature and good, but there's so many
Right.
more advantages that you could glean from it. How do people get prepared to handle the data that's coming in from equipment?
So I think if you even before we get to that, let's think back to, construction technology, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe not even that long, right? I feel like there was a lot of solutions hitting the market that were looking for a problem, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I'm a
Yeah.
software developer. I made this thing that you can now import, you know, whatever data it is, and like, who needs this, right? And I feel like that just shifted maybe 10 years ago, and a lot of these startups and technology started coming from within the industry, right? It
Mm-hmm.
was like contractors or project owners that were looking at their job site and being like, this is actually how we do this. Maybe it was like younger people coming out of college and showing up and being like, no way, like this is not really how this works, right? So
Yeah.
then they started developing some of these solutions. So that kind of leads into the reverse of that, right? To answer your question is, how do you get prepared for it? I don't think that a company really necessarily should sit down and be like, all right, we're going to get data now. Let's prepare ourselves, right? It shouldn't be like that because it's almost like you're looking for the problem then.
Mm.
I think you need to figure out what you think one of your inefficiencies is, and then figure out if the data can solve that, and then where to go next from that, right? So I mentioned, idle time of equipment. I think this became way more of a pain point for people when diesel hit whatever it peaked at in like 2021, because it wasn't just, hey, we're wasting some fuel. Now we're wasting bottom line dollars.
Yeah.
and you're burning through hours of machine, which then means you have to do your maintenance more often or, sooner in the future, right? So I think people all of a sudden, were thinking, diesel's at whatever it was. Uh, and they were like, wow, we're spending a lot more on fuel. How do we stop spending so much on fuel? Oh, hey, guess what? You can monitor idle time or total run hours of a machine through telematics data. Let's look at that and let's figure out how we can reduce that, because then
Mhm.
that just reduces fuel, which saves us money. Right. So I think it's like you got to figure out that problem instead of just saying like, hey, we're going to get data. Let's sit down and figure out how we can do this. I think it's different. Once you do that, I think it's different for everybody though. I know some contractors have essentially a war room where they have people sitting in there monitoring stuff. I know, a lot of the fleet managers kind of have their teams doing it, whether it's, in the job site trailer or remotely or whatever it is. It's it's different, and it's different for every job site, I think, and every contractor setup. But again, I think it goes back to what are you trying to solve? What's the problem? And then how do you just set yourself up for success?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think approaching it with the question first aspect of it of, here's pain XYZ. How do we get better at this? And go look at the data that way. That's the right way to do it. If not, if you start with the data and then start to say what are the questions that are coming out of this data, that's a very dangerous, slippery slope to just read
Yeah,
whatever you want into the
yeah,
data and confirm all your pre-assumptions that you had coming in. So that's a
yeah,
dangerous
yeah,
place
yeah.
to be.
You probably start focusing on stuff that doesn't matter, right? Because some of the
Right.
trends that you'll notice right away um, are probably pretty obvious to spot, but then what is that doing for you? Right? I
Mhm.
mean, it might not be solving anything that's a problem, or it might be such a minor thing that you just spend all that time on it to just, whatever, save yourself a couple bucks. Doesn't make sense, right? It's like
Right.
focus on, where you're struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So how do we better educate kind of the key stakeholders on the benefits of the construction equipment and the technologies that are associated with it and their significant impacts?
So yeah, I think that, that's adoption of technology is a struggle. And I there's probably many reasons for that. Um, a lot of the construction industry is kind of interesting because a lot of times, lower bid wins, and the margins are really thin. So investing in something um, is tough. It's kind of tough to swallow that, right? If you have you want to implement a machine control system on this motor grader, and it's, I don't know, say 6 digit cost. It's like, how am I going to recoup that? When am I going to recoup that? I don't have that much cash flow to just do it, right?
Mhm.
So I think that really gets into the project owner and some people that are, funding the projects to really understand that. um, the other thing with construction is you always hear about the change orders and, oh, costs went up and now am I eating this, or am I coming back and telling the customer that cost went up? And if we could get to a point where, I don't want to say guaranteed, but almost, right? I mean, it's like, hey, I've dug a hole for, this size house before. I had to move this much dirt. The next time I do it, it should be exactly the same. And I should know exactly what my cost is, right? So I think
Mhm.
if you think about investing in the technology and implementing it now, when's your payoff time? And then educating potentially the person funding the project, that, hey, I'm going to charge you more, but I'm going to be accurate. I'm going to know all this. We're not going to have downtime on our equipment because we're monitoring, diagnostic codes and hours of operation. So there's not going to be a time where the job site goes down. So we're not going to get delayed. I mean, you can't guarantee that stuff because things happen, right? But you could come close. And then I think for the project owner then to be like, all right, so we're going to pay you more, but the management of the project and the technology used, we're not going to get these surprise pop-up things and saying like, oops, off ramp on the highway was not graded correctly. Got to do it again. This is going to take another week, and then you're behind, right? So
Mhm.
I think for all stakeholders and whatever those are, from, you know, architect, project funder, all the way down through contractor, through operator, for them to really understand the benefit of everything, and don't think about the cost or maybe the learning curve or anything like that right now. Look further out in the future and be like, hey, so when this project's done, we're going to look back on this and say that went way easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, those questions are around kind of getting at those guarantees that you were talking about. Those are great questions to approach the data with. Pairing it back to that last conversation of here's what we're trying to accomplish and solve, and let's go see what we've done on our average of past job sites of what the data is telling us there. That gets you pretty close to that guarantee.
Yeah, it's another one of those things, since no two construction projects are the same, right? So it's going to be hard to, you're kind of comparing, apples to bourbon, right? So it's a little bit different here, but if you're thinking, if I'm moving however many cubic feet of dirt, right? It's like, it should be relatively close. You're going to run into
you can get a good
different
average
ground condition, get a good average. Yeah. So I think, monitoring that, and it'll take a lot of data to do that, right? I mean, you can't be like, it's the average of these 2 jobs I did, right? So it's that's not really an average. But yeah, it's got to be like more than that. But I think, a lot of the OEMs are, now providing some services to kind of help their customers, get the data in the right, I don't want to say format, but like, get the right data so they can understand their true cost and, kind of what actually went on the job site, so they can, keep that. And then when they do it again, keep piling that on. And then you kind of build your, I don't know what it is, like a knowledge base of everything you did almost, right? And then you can really start figuring out cost.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of one of our core themes on the podcast is all around innovation. What does innovation mean to you?
Ooh. Innovation's interesting. I think it's an interesting thing, and kind of throw the word technology, right, quote unquote, in there too. And 100 years ago, a ballpoint pen was new technology, right? So I think it's just, innovation to me is something that provides value to the end user, right? So I think it could be, you could be innovating um, on a job, you could be innovating, using an innovation that an equipment manufacturer put in the piece of equipment. You could be innovating just your workflow, right? And I think it's anything that, hits that bottom line and provides value to the person that needs it the most, right? So I think there's a lot of innovation going on, and a lot of it means, or I guess matters, different to different people. So, I mean, one of the things we kind of didn't really touch on here is obviously again, follow on road, right? You look at Tesla, and all their vehicles are battery electric, right? So electric, call it even alternative power, whether it's battery electric, hydrogen, alternative renewable fuels are being, started to be used in construction equipment. But it's like, who's that providing value to, right? So it's an interesting innovation, but it's, if you're, working in a building in downtown Chicago, you can't be running a diesel machine, right? So, hey, a electric mini excavator sounds great, right? Or you think about the cost of maintenance. If it has less moving parts and less stuff like that might make sense. But to those people where, you're fine in a remote area, still running, a diesel machine, like that innovation doesn't really matter. So to them, it's not an innovation. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think pairing the innovation with values is a good partnership for sure. Well, how do people find out more information and connect with you?
Yeah, so we'll talk about AEM first. So aem.org is our website. I mentioned, we cover manufacturers and component suppliers of the off-road industry, and we own and run ConExpo ConAg. We also own another trade show in Louisville, Kentucky, called the Utility Expo, coming up at the end of September. But all that information's on aem.org. Me, you can find me on LinkedIn, John Summers. Otherwise, happy to reach out to me, and happy to help anybody with any questions.
Awesome. Well, final question for you. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in the industry. what would you pick to innovate?
So I mentioned I listened to a couple other episodes, so I knew this was coming, right? So as of 3 hours ago, I knew this was coming. I I really think that I kind of answered this already, and I think this would have such a significant impact on people who are already in the industry and then people who are thinking about getting in, right? And I think it's to really understand all of the impacts that innovations or technology have, right? So sustainability is obviously a hot word topic right now, right? So you think about even these construction contractors that are thinking, oh, we need to do something and show our sustainability initiatives, right? You probably already are, right? I mean, if they're monitoring their idle time and if they've reduced that over the last few years, guess what? You're burning less fuel, you have less carbon output. There, you're doing something sustainably. I mean, it's not that simple, right? I mean, you're probably going to put some metrics behind it, but I think it's like to think about these technologies and be like, what things am I not thinking about? Maybe they don't apply to my role, right? But what else are they having an impact on? You think that I mentioned the grade control and not doing rework. You're not burning fuel. You're probably using less material. It's having all of these other impacts that people aren't necessarily thinking about. So I think the magic potion would be to give everybody and be like, if somebody tells you a technology and it does this, don't just think about that. Like, I wish everybody could see all of the, ancillary benefits that it could provide and understand that it'll be worth the investment, worth the time to implement it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think so often people jump to, the grandiose, one big, huge revolutionary change when really in reality, even those big revolutionary changes are 1% improvements just stacked on top of each other. And you're just seeing that final step and
Right.
You're not looking at all the steps along the way. So yeah, I think some sort of glasses or something that you can see all those 1% improvements. That'd be amazing.
You think about that with even as a consumer though, right? I mean, you think about, I just watched the movie BlackBerry the other day. If you haven't seen that, it's about the story about Research in Motion, a company that made the BlackBerry and how they went to whatever it was, 50% of the cell phone market and then went and died pretty much. Yeah. Right. But at that point, there was a line in that movie saying, it is not a phone that does email, right? It is your email and everything like that also happens to be a phone, right? So it's like the thing you're thinking about is like when you got an iPhone, you were like, hey, this is cool. I have email on it. Well, you also have your calendar. Now look at all the other stuff you can do with it. And you think about, if you take an Uber from my house to downtown, guess what? I don't have to drive home. I also don't have to pay for parking. I also don't have to drive around circles and look for parking, right? So it's all of those additional benefits that you get. So I wish we had those glasses, man. When you figure out how to make those,
I like them. You can make a lot of money on those.
That's right. That's right.
That's awesome. Well, John, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today.
Yeah, Todd, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.